It's the week after the Video Games Awards and also the week before Christmas, so one might think there'd be a bit of a lull in the news cycle roundabout now, but no such luck exists because people still continue to do things, old stories still continue to resurface. Some of those things that happen in the news cycle are actually good. Some of them are bad. Some of them are just plain weird. And I mean that quite literally. Hi, I'm Prob, and welcome to News Trash here on The Geek Show, your regular look at the more interesting things that have been happening in the video games world over the last few days. Before we go any further, if you like what you hear on this channel, then please do consider subscribing to us. It does help us a lot with our growth, and it does help us reach more people. In return, we'll endeavour to keep you interested and entertained whenever we do the news. So kicking things off today is not the news, it's actually a report from IGN, which is called The Battle for Bungie's Soul, Inside the Studio's Struggle for a Better Work Culture. Now this is an investigation that IGN have done into Bungie in the light of their September announcement that they were pulling back the curtain on their desire to push back on toxic work culture by introducing a number of new initiatives. Hiring a diversity and inclusion director, updating hiring practices, improving training and tools, allowing anonymous HR reporting, ending forced arbitration. All sorts of measures were announced. It was lauded across the industry as a set of proactive, forward-looking moves. Lots of scandals were going on at that point because of abuse and harassment and crunch and all sorts of things like that. But the response from within the company was different, as IGN's report has found. Now, I'm not going to go into what I think about this report. I do encourage everyone to read it, whether you are working in the video games industry or a gamer yourself. It is very, very well worth reading, and I think IGN have done an amazing job with it. I will link it in the description below. As I said, I would encourage everyone to read this, but more importantly, talk about it on Reddit, on social media, in the comments below, wherever. Have those conversations. Talk to people about what's going on in the video games industry. Express your opinion. If you think it's wrong that these things are happening, then say it's wrong. Because at the end of the day, unless everyone takes a stand together, nothing will change. Sorry, that's me being a bit preachy, but I live in constant hope that at some point the video games industry themselves will stop being so bloody childish, grow the hell up, and start taking responsibility for their own actions. There are only really two ways that I can see the video games industry improving by external factors. One of those is if there's state regulation into how the video games industry conducts its hiring, firing, its code of conduct, stuff like that, which I really don't want to happen because that would be far too authoritarian. The other is unions, workers' unions. Now, video games companies by their nature, as I mentioned in the previous episode, companies the size of Activision Blizzard and Ubisoft and EA and that, they really don't want unions in the video games industry. But North America has its first video game union at Vodio Games, who are the developers of Beastbreaker. The workers there have unionized, creating the first certified video game studio union in North America. The Vodio management voluntarily recognized the union, which includes both full-time employees and contracted workers. Now, the studio's first game, Beastbreaker, only came out in September. They only have a staff of about 13 employees and contract workers spread out across the United States and Canada. The union, called Vodio Workers United, represents all eligible employees, more than half of whom are independent contractors. According to Caroline Jong, who is a designer at Vodio, we were really inspired by what a lot of our colleagues were doing in the game industry and the tech industry and beyond. It felt like a natural next step for us to be talking about, hey, maybe we should be unionizing and help set a positive precedent for the digital games industry as well. And I agree. And I hope that more and more developers will have unions and will accept unions at the higher levels. I think that once these are formed and they join up with some of the larger unions and merge and create big organizations like the CWA in America, then companies like Activision Blizzard and EA and the rest will start having to pay attention to what the workers are doing. These are the kind of first steps that may eventually see an end to things like crunch. They may actually see an end to things like harassment in the workplace and toxic work cultures bullying by senior staff, those sorts of things. Because if you're in a workers' union, you have access to people who know what your rights are as an employee. You have access to good lawyers, better than you might get as an individual. You also have the weight of an organisation behind you, and that organisation may have tens of people with it. They might have hundreds, maybe thousands. Now, there are some people in the video games industry who don't want unions and don't want people joining unions. Those people usually work for the people who own or control or are on the board of directors of various publishers, that sort of thing. People like Brian Bulletow from Activision Blizzard. The problem is that right now, within the video games industry, all of the power is gathered at the top, which is why people like Bobby Kotick can fill the board of directors at Activision Blizzard with his friends. It's basically an old boys network at the very top of these companies. All of them know each other, all of them are friends with each other. Nobody's going to decry or deny any of the others because they're all part of the same club, group, whatever. Unions, on the other hand, allow the workers, the employees, the people who actually do the jobs, they allow them some kind of power, some kind of backing, so they can go against these people at the top. They may not be able to take them on at the same level, but they can take on the people immediately above them, and maybe even immediately above them. The repercussions of having unions in the video games industry are actually really, really massive. I'm not going to go into them, because this is industry-changing stuff. I find it fascinating because it's not often you get to see an industry change this much in such a short space of time. This is basically something that you would only see in fiction happening in real life. So yeah, people might find it tedious and boring, but it is important to understand what is actually going on, especially if you are looking at a career in the video games industry. Anyway, moving on to another area where unions would actually have an impact, and that's ROBLOX. Now, ROBLOX is a platform, we all know that, but it's been criticised, again, for its lack of safeguards for kids and its stock market-like collectibles. There is a second report from People Make Games which details a second crop of concerns. They also claim that the ROBLOX Corporation, or whatever they're called, put pressure on them to take down their original report, claiming that there were all sorts of things wrong with it, but not actually saying what exactly was wrong with the original report. According to People Make Games, they've been contacted by a number of users of ROBLOX who've approached them saying that they've had this issue with the platform or this issue with the platform. Even individual developers on ROBLOX are having difficulty because they are up against groups of developers. So the results that ROBLOX has as a platform on what is good and what isn't are actually skewed. Not only that, the platform itself apparently has a culture against speaking out, or people risk being seen as difficult to work with. The lack of recourse for people wronged in such a way is actually so bad that there's a possibility of managerial malfeasance on the ROBLOX developer forums that may fall under the category of harassment. It's such a shocking thing, because this is supposed to be a platform for kids to develop their own games and stuff like that. Now, I will link the original report in the description below. The original report is actually quite a damning indictment of ROBLOX as a platform, because they basically use children to make stuff, and then they make money off it. The child is encouraged to make the stuff thinking they're going to make their own money, they're going to have their own sort of income, they can buy stuff with it, that sort of thing. That's all a pipe dream. They don't really make that much money off it. Few pence here and there. ROBLOX is the one that makes the most money. Which, correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't that child labour? Anyway, moving on to NFTs, the other big flavour of this particular winter period. Everyone seems to be fascinated with NFTs, and Ubisoft staff have basically admitted that they don't understand the company's new NFT scheme, which is called Quartz. According to internal messages which have been seen by Kotaku, the developers at Ubisoft are worried about having to put NFTs in their games. There was a post announcing Quartz on Ubisoft's internal social media hub, Mana, and apparently it quickly filled up with questions and concerns from developers across the company. Some didn't understand which old problems the new tech actually solved, while others were worried about receiving mandates to start integrating NFTs into their own games. NFTs are a stupid thing. And I think anyone who's seriously thinking about including NFTs into their game is just plain insane. People like Peter Molyneux, for example, who is one of the finest examples of a weird, crazy person that I've seen in recent years. Now, he's creating a blockchain business sim called Legacy, and apparently it's going to push the boundaries of blockchain gaming beyond your wildest dreams. Legacy will apparently be a creative entrepreneur's dream come true, an opportunity for players to build their very own business, designing their very own products from a huge array of possibilities as they create a business empire the likes of which the world has never seen. Big words from the man who basically put a rock in a virtual space and got us to buy hammers to basically chip away at it to win some mysterious prize. Or did everyone forget that that's what he did? Now, according to Peter Molyneux, players will be able to own a land NFT to start their own in-game blockchain business association. They'll also have access to legacy keys that can be lent to others to start an in-game business and become partners. Profits of legacy coin will then be shared. It all just sounds weirdly complicated and convoluted, and I'll be honest, it doesn't sound like a game that would be interesting to me. And I'm interested in some really, really boring subjects like the laws of unionization and seeing an industry change and stuff like that. And even I find Peter Molyneux's game, the whole concept of it, to be tedious beyond belief. And the inclusion of NFTs and blockchain just makes it worse. But it's still not the worst NFT story from this week, because that would go to Stalker 2, who are going to be selling an NFT that lets the owner become an NPC in the game. Now, according to the game's developer, GSC Game World, it's teaming up with the NFT trading platform DMarket to use blockchain technology that it claims will let the community own a piece of Stalker 2. Starting this month, players can register for item drops, the first of which will be an auction which will allow one player to become an NPC in the game. Now, the game is due for release in April next year, so that's just enough time for someone to take a photo of your mug, do a really dodgy Photoshop job on it, and then drop you straight into the game. For a non-speaking role somewhere in the background, maybe you'll get shot in the face if you're lucky. If you're really unlucky, you might end up being, I don't know, some kind of creature, some kind of monster. The advert does say, become the first metahuman, so maybe you'll end up being a weird thing with claws and tentacles and too many teeth on your back. Anything is possible. The imagination is the only limitation. Anyway, we're going to move on. Apparently, at some point in 2022, Google Play Games, the app, is actually coming to Windows. That will allow you to play a selection of games that are compatible with Google Play in your Windows system, so you'll be able to play them on your PC and things like that. I, for one, am actually looking forward to this, as it's another example of how the lines between Android and PC, or mobile devices and home devices, are actually changing and blurring, and the two are combining it into one system. So maybe Microsoft, when they were talking about having one system across all these different devices, maybe they were onto something. Maybe they actually were predicting the future. So, what else has been happening? Well, a PlayStation 4 has been jailbroken, and the exploit might actually work on the PlayStation 5 too. The jailbreak, which has been dubbed Poo BS4, I'm not going to go into, but it is something that, if it works, means that homebrew apps and unauthorized copies of games just became very, very feasible for PS4 owners and possibly even PS5 owners. So, our penultimate story, and this is the one I think a lot of people have been waiting for. There has officially been an announcement from Ubisoft Toronto that they are currently hiring because the developers of Far Cry 6 are going to be making a remake of the original Splinter Cell. Now, in a Ubisoft blog post, producer Matt West suggested that gamers have an even more refined palette, and because of that, the studio would be building the project from the ground up, including updating visuals and revitalizing design elements in an effort to better suit modern players, which I think is the correct move. The hardware differences between what's available now and the old Xbox are monumental, and there is no real way to bridge that gap with a simple remaster. Anyway, I promised you weird news at the beginning of the episode. A scientist who has taught rats to play Doom 2 now wants to stream those rats playing Doom 2 on Twitch because he thinks it's a valid way to monetize the project. Victor Toth built a VR setup for rodents and taught 3 rats how to play the game by training them to walk down a corridor in the game without any assistance. The aim of the project was to create a VR system that would train rodents to walk around 3D environments without restraining them too much and without needing any surgical procedures. I mean, it's such a staggering idea that it kind of collapses parts of my brain, but also expands other parts of my brain so that my brain can't actually cope, which is why it's our final story of today. Let us know what you think about the stories that we've covered today in the comments below. We'd really like to know what your thoughts are on all of the topics. I'll be back in a few days with hopefully more news, as long as things continue to tick over the way they have been within the video games industry. Until then, thanks for watching.